For your background, we'll be getting a lighter blue and a little bit of white and mixing it together, getting like a soft baby blue, leaving a little bit of space at the bottom just for another color, and just hitting a small streak of that on there before immediately transitioning into more of a regular blue. So white and blue, and then pushing it up into more of a regular blue, lightening it up a little bit more. Again, just right there at the bottom of that blue section, leaving the bottom of the canvas white still, and then just kind of streaking to get a nice soft transition in between this regular blue and that lighter white blue. And then a little bit higher than halfway through that painting, where we have this solid blue color, starting to round it at the edges, just pushing the very sides of that up a little bit, and then bringing in a tiny bit of a black paint or even a dark purple paint just to make this blue a little bit darker at the top. Again, curving it all the way off of the top of the painting here, just going from that really light blue we made earlier all the way to this deeper, richer blue. And here you can see at the very top hitting in some solid black paint just to get it super dark up there where the night sky is taking over, and then softly blending it in with some blue, using a little bit of that regular blue here because it's going to mix with that wet paint that's already on the painting to soften that transition up. Really not being afraid to let this paint get very streaky and have some of these darker tones pressed down into the lighter section we've already made, or if it gets too dark, doing the opposite, jumping back to that lighter color and pressing it up. But we really like these streaky tones. Down here at the bottom, we're going to be putting a little bit of orange paint and some white paint down here to get a lighter orange. Sometimes the orange needs a little bit of a yellow just to brighten it up a little bit, but that very bottom blank section is just that white paint and a little bit of a lighter orange. Again, streaking it a little bit to where it's lighter sometimes and darker other times. And you can always jump back and forth between those orange tones and the white tones and even some yellow tones to get that going. And then here in the middle, right where the blue and the orange sections are touching, just going in there with a tiny bit of white paint to help those two sections transition together. And you can see again on the edges about halfway up that painting, kind of curving along that line for the sky. There we go, a little bit more of that curve through that blue section, keeping it nice and flat down there in that orange bottom section. Now just taking that big brush again, grabbing some orange and white, but a little bit darker orange and not so well mixed with the white, and then just tapping on some little cloud coverage. It's just a light little tap and just kind of squishing that brush around in a bunch of different directions, using just the corner sometimes, doing little taps, getting a little more aggressive with taps other times. We can grab the orange and white mixture and then even throw in a little bit of orange by itself and a little bit of white by itself as well. Once again, using some yellow to warm up those tones if it's needed for that, but just tapping in lightly some little clouds. They're very far away down here at the bottom, so we're keeping it very, very tiny as we do this. You are doing a great job. I love your painting. It's looking amazing. Don't forget, you can always jump around to those different tones if you want to go in with some plain white like we're doing right here, just to get a little bit more cloud coverage with a lot more texture going. You can jump into that darker orange. You can jump back to the first mixture we did. If you want to jump into your blue for any reason, I would let this orange dry all of the way. If not, you might get a little bit of a strange green color by these mixing. If your blue is still wet and you're having that problem, just wipe the brush off, get a little bit of fresh paint, let that part dry, go somewhere else for a minute, and then come back in there once it's a little bit more dry and throw a little bit of cloud coverage on there. But you can see as we get higher up on this painting, starting to curve the clouds instead of following the side to side line at the bottom. It's curved up here, so we're curving our clouds along the curved line of the background, having some teeny tiny drifty clouds sometimes back there in the background, having some really big, beautiful, fluffy clouds, not overthinking it, just really sprinkling those in there to have a wonderfully full sky painting. Getting all these smaller, lighter colored clouds to our happy place down here at the bottom, and then we're going to use a really wet paintbrush and some white paint to just sprinkle in a little bit of star coverage up here at the top, not a lot, but just grabbing a lot of water, a lot of white paint, mixing it up and sprinkling some stardust over the top. You just kind of flick the paintbrushes and that paint will come right off for you like stars. And then jumping right back into that lighter orange white cloud mixture. These clouds at the top are going to be a lot darker, but they need a little highlight from that setting sun. So sprinkling in some smaller rows that'll end up being bigger for our clouds. And then grabbing a more rounded brush shape, we're going to get some red paint and put on like a base coat for those bigger clouds, just to make them pop a little bit more once we have our full color on there, getting them bigger, laying out exactly how we want those larger clouds to be. And remembering not to make this red paint super thick, as we will be going over it with another color. So if it's too thick, it'll be too wet when we do the next color layered on top of this. And then sprinkling in our little foliage. I've switched here to a smaller squarish brush shape. These are just tiny little lines to help make sure our forest is wonderfully spread out. Some people go one tree at a time. I add more in between these, but these basic little tiny pokes are a great treetop layout. So start by spreading out a few little black lines, barely poking off the bottom of the painting, some of them being taller, some of them being smaller, making sure they're very spread out. These are just the very tip tops of some trees that you're seeing. And then there's many ways you can do these. That first one there, this is like a letter V shape that is following up that first line. Let's do it again. These are letter V's as in Victor, and it's just the very top of the tree. So just kind of pushing up those branches like they are reaching up towards the night sky as it is setting. And then here maybe adding another tree. These are not quite close enough, so maybe adding another tree and then doing like an upside down letter V. We can also take that flatter brush and just very gently tap it side to side to get some teeny tiny little branches going, some perfectly horizontal ones, make them look nice and leafy, because if we just gently tap, we'll get that wonderful brush spread, so it'll look a little bit more like leaves on the trees. Doing little side to side taps sometimes, doing these one pushing up like the letter V, as you could see here a little bit more clearly. Maybe jumping in, adding another tree as needed, doing just a little teeny tiny top of a tree. It can be a lot shorter to fill in those spaces, or if it needs to be a little taller, that's fine as well. But just kind of feeling it out, changing it up, or doing them all the same, whatever makes you feel a little more comfortable. It's your forest going in your painting, so I want you to love it. So just here again, doing that upside down letter V, or like a triangle shape without a bottom. This one is going to be a little taller, but you can kind of spread it out in varying lengths so that it's not just a triangle shape where it's skinnier at the top and wider at the bottom. Even though it is a treetop, it does follow that same path that trees normally take, where they're skinny at the top and wide at the bottom, but not as drastic since you're only getting a little sense of the tree. Switching to these little side to side dashes sometimes. Remembering that in a real forest, there are no two trees that are alike. So if yours are not perfectly identical across the board, that is absolutely perfect. You've done a wonderful job. It's going to look just like a real forest. This is also a very abstract painting. So even though we know exactly what it is, with it being a nightfall, sunset, forest painting, it doesn't have to look perfect because it's abstract. So if you get a little bit of a differently shaped cloud or a funny shaped tree, it's still going to look exactly like it belongs there. Once again, jumping in here, those little tippy taps with that black paint and the square brush and the water, all the things mixed in, adding treetops where there's not enough of a forest happening. You can leave some gaps as well. It's okay to have some gaps, but just getting on there, making those letter V's, making those triangle shapes, making those little branches longer sometimes, shorter other times, and varying them so that it doesn't turn into one giant triangle shape that you can't really tell there's branches in there. If it's looking a little bit naked, like if you get all your little branches on there and that tree still looks like it is really missing some branches, but you like the size and you like the shape, you can tap right down the center of it on that little line that we drew for the trunk, and it'll fill in those missing spaces without changing the overall size and shape of your tree. These are looking so good. Jumping in here with just a couple of more trees to go, making sure they're nice and full where we want them to be, adding a couple extras where they're too far spaced out, and then varying the different types of trees, maybe doing a couple more of those little dotted side to side ones to get that nice horizontal look to the branches, getting some longer ones and some shorter ones, tapping a lot to get that leaf shape going, doing some of those little letter V branches, keeping them super tiny up here at the top, and then getting a little bit longer as we descend down that treetop here. And then of course we can also do the upside down letter V, or the triangle shape that doesn't have bottoms to it, if you will, but just taking your time, not overthinking it, getting those last couple details on that forest. And then we're going to jump back up here at the top. This is purple and red mixed together at the top. We're going to fill in at those big old clouds, those really big ones that we laid out a little bit with our red earlier. It's going to be dry enough we can put this purple right on top of it. Now, if you do happen to have a little bit of red that's not dry and you're going in there and you're putting this purple on and it gets way too red, then we can always wipe that brush off, get a little bit of plain purple and jazz that on there directly to the red and let it mix on the painting just like it would since it's red and purple on your palette. And then just sprinkling in these last few dark clouds. And that's it. Our nightfall sunset forest is finished. It looks amazing. Don't forget to come back next week and subscribe. It's appreciated.